This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. So I was watching a Tom Bukovac video. Tom, if you happen across this video, I'm sorry for talking about you. But about kind of the gear trap, and really cool video. Amazing playing, a really dope loop at the start of it. Which goes through a bunch of keys, kind of like a very jazzy version of Tom. Anyway, so in it, he kind of talks about a few things. I think basically a subscriber had asked him about what sounded like a Fender Tonemaster Pro, and he kind of was asking, like, I'm told that I've got all of these amps in there, and Tom kind of sort of went off and said, you know, like, you're not going to make like $2 phone parts sound like a real amp. Like, you need something with transformers. And so I kind of wanted to explore this a little bit.
People have, with all this modeling and stuff, they really have made people believe that they have the original stuff. Like, people are really falling for that.
I'd like to tell you that I was able to prove him wrong, but ultimately I wasn't.
You can't make an amp out of cell phone parts and have it sound like a blackface Fender Deluxe Reverb. I'm sorry.
In this part here, what you're going to hear is I've got a few staples of Tom's. So this is the Vemoram Shanks ODS1, which I think his son had on a pedal board at one point. This is like a clone of a Nobel's ODR1. Behind me here is a Fender Pro Reverb from 1965, an actual bona fide old Fender amp. And I thought, right, let's try first of all plugins, because he kind of said,
you can have the plug-in and it might do some cool stuff, but it's not the real thing. Same thing with all this guitar shit.
Actually, some of it doesn't matter as much as we probably think, because if you listen to the end result, it's all going to be within a ballpark, and there are more important factors like being Tom Bukovac that make you sound really good on anything. So, Shanks ODS into a Fender Pro Reverb. I've recorded it through a load box, which is going to remove some magic potentially, and then it's all going through the same cab. But what I decided to do was, because I kind of felt like plugins actually, I think, get a bit of a bad rap, as well as digital gear in general. Some people really seem to totally dislike it, particularly when it's doing amp modeling, because a lot of people have some digital gear on their boards. They might have a Strymon Brig, they might have a Strymon Lex, they might even have a Line 6 M9. But when it comes to amps, some people can be really purist about it, which is not a terrible thing. However, anyway, so then I also I used the UAD Dream 65, which is not even based on a Pro Reverb, it's based on a Deluxe. But I thought maybe those might sound similar. And then I thought, what about our beloved Nano Cortex? I made a couple of captures of it, and here's the results. Anyway, same take, same, Nobels into these devices. Let me know what you think in the comments. as someone on YouTube is super interested in digital stuff as well as the real stuff, I tend to use the digital stuff more, kind of because it's just quicker, and what I do is definitely more disposable than what Tom does, you know, actually playing on records and stuff. But I don't know, like I would have been really happy, and I was expecting actually the Nano Cortex to get way closer than it did. I had to end up kind of boosting the gain a bit and the bass, so I don't really know why that. Maybe this is a particular area of like amp modeling that is tricky, you know, like a Blackface 65 amp on 7, it's got quite an amount of breakup. What I can hear myself, so if I'm hearing this difference, I'm presuming someone with really good ears like Tom is definitely hearing this, and I'm presuming a bunch of you guys at home might be able to hear this as well, even through YouTube and through all of the compression that we hear about and digital stuff that people don't like. Basically there is on the real amp like an undertone that happens as the gain, as you sort of dig in a bit more on the gain, but that's the thing that's not missing there. It's also kind of like a softer thing in the high end than the Nano Cortex I was finding, and actually I felt like the Universal Audio Dream 65 actually sounded a bit closer to this real Fender amp than the Nano Cortex did. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Ultimately, one other point that Tom made, and he has said in the past that he wouldn't be caught dead using a Kemper. I wonder if he's tried some of the other things just out of interest, that you'd kind of be interested to see, or, you know, are there plugins that he uses in the studio that are part of his workflow? Because I think there's a bunch of people that have gone from using a bunch of outboard gear to going in the box or using more plugins. Maybe guitar tone's the one kind of area where it's just like, let's not do that, let's use an amp, which I think is totally fair. I think Tom's studio at home, from what I've seen on the rig rundown, the cab, sorry, is like way far away, like isolated, and I think that is often the case in a studio as well. When I've gone into a studio, it's been that sort of situation. You sit in the control room and the amp is somewhere away, turned up really loud with a door shut behind it. He said in the video that it's like a Bogner 2x12. Bit of wisdom there as well about keeping a cab the same but with different amps for more consistent kind of results, and something that Leon Todd has talked about as well in the modeling space. There are, I think, loads of lessons that you can take from the analog world to the digital world. That's kind of the cool thing about it, in my opinion. But yeah, the ultimate piece of knowledge was that the gear...
Don't worry about who's got what and what's out there. It doesn't matter.
Of course, it is partly marketing, where, you know, you've got, say, Fender that are going to tell you that the Tone Master Deluxe Reverb is going to sound the same as a real Deluxe Reverb with tubes in it, or maybe even a vintage one. Whether that is the case for you or not, you'd have to, I guess, for yourself, test the two side by side, which most of us are probably never going to do. Doing A/B tests like this is quite, like, it takes time and can just be, like, it might be better off just spending time playing guitar instead. It's kind of the lesson from doing yet another A/B test, which takes me a bunch of time, and I think, yeah, it's not as much, as close as I'd have hoped. But the Dream, actually, I thought was pretty close. Close enough that what is making a difference is my playing versus the tone. So either of those tones, I think, would work perfectly fine in context. But if I'm playing like a donkey, it's going to sound like a donkey playing through a plugin versus a donkey playing through... I saw in the comments there was a guy saying, like, I love this idea of like the vintage amps and stuff like that, but first of all, vintage amps, there aren't that many of them, certainly like in the UK, that are easily accessible. There are plenty of amps around, but the other thing is, and I get messages like this all the time, like I, you know, live in a house where I can't be that noisy and all that sort of stuff, and so I think that for me is why I try to do like these comparisons and bits and pieces like that to show that, well, you know, as fair as possible, like, do these things sound close to each other or not? And I think that is kind of, for me, what this is about. I don't know, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I had a bit more of a think about what this gear trap might be, and I think I've kind of come to this conclusion that the trap is, instead of listening to the tone or thinking about tone, you're actually listening to the part. And the part is the bit that's more important. Presuming that, you know, like in the introduction, the tones were close enough that I think the more important part is the part. And I think it's that what Tom is really kind of saying, like, don't worry too much about the gear stuff. Like, it's not as important as you're playing, as important as the part. Is that the gear trap? Possibly. But if you had, you know, infinite access to gear, all of that sort of stuff, and access to these amazing studios with amazing mics and amazing history, then probably you too would choose the amps every single time, I'm guessing, right? And I'm guessing that'd be the same for me at home. You know, I have access to a vintage Fender here, but it makes more sense in this context for me to just plug straight into my audio interface, and that actually gets me results quicker. I was actually chatting to my buddy Jake last night, and he kind of we did like a little Christmas time reel on Instagram, and he was like, it took 2 minutes, just plugged into UAD, and Jake has been very firmly an amp guy, and he's kind of like, well, you know, if I had access to all these amps again, I'd do the same thing if I had a 100-watt plexi. I don't, you know, and I think that's the reality for a lot of us, that we're probably not playing in studios, and maybe also we're not at that huge level, but I think really the level doesn't really matter as much. It's kind of across any level, the part and your playing is the thing that is going to determine what people actually think of that, and how you feel about it as well, potentially. That's the gear trap, I think.